we're going to do today is, as we're finishing up our series on experiencing the sacred, what I want to do is I want to say a few words, which for me hopefully will not last longer than 20 minutes. Just kidding. I know. And then I want to open it up to a discussion, because I find that I learned so much from the wisdom in this room. And every time we have a discussion, folks come up to me and say, I love that. I love hearing what everyone else thinks. I love hearing their experiences and what they believe. And it just adds to the fabric of this community, because there's so much wisdom out there. So this is what we're going to do today. So my talk is entitled, Here's the Truth. And let me tell you a little bit about that title. Okay, it is a bait and switch. Who's not going to come to listen to the truth? No. But I was at a seminar I was at a seminar a couple of weeks ago, and some guy was there who had done some polling, and he said when they tried to get people's attention on social media, they learned, Linda, you were there, they learned the important thing to say is, here's the truth. Because people go, whoa, let me write this down. This is truth. Okay, good. I'll just wait 5 minutes and listen to that. And I just love the title, so I thought I would finish our series on experiencing the sacred with that. Our beliefs, if you look in your bulletin, we don't talk about these enough. I should talk about them some more, but on the right-hand side of your bulletin, there's a list of what we believe. And the second bullet, the first one is we believe in one divine spirit manifest in all creation. These beliefs are an articulation of our general principles. Really what they do is they articulate really what is the perennial wisdom, which is the wisdom that is at the core of the world's enduring faith traditions that they all teach in one way or another. The second one is we honor the world's diverse faith traditions and we take wisdom from each, believing there are many paths to divine and each reflects truth. That is such a great statement. But then when you get to truth, you ask, what is that? It's a very elusive goal. Each reflects truth. I bet if I were to take a poll, there would be 15 different interpretations of what that means. But it's important because that's what we teach. All these different paths, each lead to truth. Each faith tradition contains a set of beliefs. This is what we believe, A, B, C, and D. However, what those beliefs are, they are objective statements of principle, but they're also calls to action. They're also paths for how to live, to unfold for yourself what that truth is. They're not just metaphysical statements. They're ways to get yourself to what that truth is. The Buddha said, or is said to have said, you always got to be careful when people say the Buddha said, because I don't think anybody was writing this down. But the Buddha is like Abraham Lincoln said, be careful of what you read on the internet. Okay. The Buddha said, or is said to have said, doubt everything, find your own light. And this is a man who spent his life teaching people how to find nirvana. Doubt everything, find your own light. What does that mean? It means that we can only speak from experience. It means that we can only interpret the truth or find the truth and live it in our own particular way. One thing I have found as I stand up here and talk to you week after week is that when I think of a topic I'm going to talk about, the universe always sends me a way to reinforce it. It's, I made a joke a couple of years ago that my next talk next week is going to be how to handle sudden unexpected wealth. The universe always just wham, that's what you're thinking about. Okay, so this week I was going to talk about the truth. Here's the truth. And that's an ethereal thing. It's off in the clouds. But then I was at work all week, and I got to tell you, my week was horrible. It was stressful. Every time I picked up the phone with somebody, they'd go, God, you sound horrible. It was a bad week. And so I thought, how am I going to take this horrible week and turn it into a talk that is uplifting, or that is meaningful, or that conveys something other than the fact that I wanted to spend the entire week curled up under my desk. Then I realized, and I think it's just because I was just so low, I got this on a very visceral level, that unless I could find the truth and find the holy in my lousy week, I was not going to find it anywhere. If I could not experience it right here in my life right now, it was nowhere to be found. Think about that for a second. If we cannot use the building blocks of our own experience to lead us to what is true for us, we have nothing else to use. So in that sense, the week that I was sent was just perfect. Every moment gave me an opportunity to learn, to reflect, and to transcend all the stuff that was happening into something meaningful and something lasting. Lama Surya Das once said, "The first lessons we need to learn is to accept and connect to the lives we are leading. For," and this is all in caps, "this is it. This is the path for us and the right one. Let's make the most of it. This is the spiritual way." It's like the cartoon we had last week. Remember the two Buddhist monks? What happens next? Nothing happens. This is it. Our lives are the toolkit that we have to lead us to the truth. Okay. The last couple weeks, we have talked about experiencing the sacred. We've talked about doing it where we are, right? We've talked about examining our lives, examining our egos, examining our reactions and our feelings and our judgments about things with what? Precision and gentleness and letting go. We have reflected on the fact that we amazingly have everything we need to awaken and unfold right here through the experiences of our lives and through the filters that we apply to them. Everything we need is right here to experience the sacred. That's what we talked about last week. The week before, we talked about gateways to the sacred. How do we walk through that door to the sacred? We talked about sacred time, setting aside sacred time. We talked about emulating people who are good examples for us. We talked about sacred space, how we, even here, come together and create space for individual and communal growth. This month has been about how we find the holy. Okay, so the question for today is, what does that translate into when we talk about truth? Because truth is something we all want to find. It's hard to do these days because it's so relative. I have my truth, you have your truth. We turn on the radio, there's 9,000 different truths going on. All we have to do is follow politics to realize who the heck knows what the truth is, right? But we all want to know it because we all think there's a value there. What is the truth? We want to hold on to it like we want to hold on to a rope when we're going under for the third time. What is the truth? In the realm of spirituality, what strikes me about this is that the truth is directly connected to our ability to experience our oneness with all things. That's where I am with that right now. We can talk about experiencing God. We can talk about experiencing the holy, looking up at the sky and seeing a beautiful moon or a beautiful sunset or whatever awakens that feeling of the holy in us. But at the end of the day, for me, in my experience right now, and this is what I want to talk about when I stop talking, is the truth is our ability to see our oneness with all of creation. To put aside our illusion of separateness, what the Hindus call Maya, that illusion in which we all find ourselves. What does St. Paul say? We see through a glass darkly in this human suit. We just don't see it. We get so tied up in reinforcing our egos. We think that we are something special. I think I'm special because I'm this, because I have this degree, because I make this much money, because whatever. We spend so much time reinforcing our own egos and our own specialness, and what we don't see is that is so illusory. Karen Armstrong and many others relates it to all rivers flowing back into the ocean. When the river flows back into the ocean, the river doesn't continue to say, I am that river, I am that river. No, because it's all the same. It's all back in the one from which it came, to which it will return, and from which it has never been different. And it's so easy for us to sit and say these things. When I can sit up here and say, we are all one. What does that mean to you? Does it mean that you see the face of God in the other person you see? Does it mean that you value being compassionate over being right? That's a tough one. isn't it? So many of us value being right. But I suggest that living lives of compassion brings us back to that vision of knowing that we are all the one. Our path to the truth, whatever faith tradition you follow, we're going to talk about that more next month, leads us to an understanding and a knowing that that is who we are. Now, if you are a follower of the Hindu path, and I spent a lot of time reading Hinduism for today's talk, what does that take? It takes years of sitting at the feet of your guru, reading the Hindu scriptures, or the Upanishads. The word Upanishad means sitting close by to, because that's how you learn it in that tradition. You sit and you absorb this wisdom, and you are given tools, and you are given practices, because it requires both things. It requires a contemplative practice, and it requires action to integrate these things in your lives. That's how you learn this awareness of your oneness with all things. And that sounds so airy-fairy, and the problem is I'm standing up here trying to articulate something which is completely inarticulable. And I apologize for taking your time to do it. But one of the things that we do here is try to give each other the tools to do that. There's one Hindu sage of the Upanishads. His name was, hang on, let me see if I can find his name here. I have it. Vakyashana. Nope, Vajnavalkya. And he was one of the leading rishis of the Upanishads. And he resisted the urge to even try to name the unknowable. He was the one who would go around, instead of saying, truth is this, truth is that, he would go around and he would say, neti, 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 which is not that, not that, not that. He couldn't name what it was, but he could identify what it was not. And hopefully, by identifying all the things that it was not, we could somehow unpack the truth that was. It's like the first line of the Tao. What is the first line of the Tao? The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, right? If we can name it, you've missed the boat. It's not that. So what we try to learn, what we try to unpack within ourselves is that truth that is completely inarticulable. It is only one that can be experienced. It is ungraspable. We try to do it individually in terms of a communal practice. We try to do it in community by how we live, by how we treat each other. One of the things Karen Armstrong says, which I find interesting in her book, The Great Transformation, which is about the first axial age, great book. She says, how do we determine living religious principles that benefit us from religious principles that don't? As we try to live together in community, as we try to reach that oneness that is the truth of each of us, even if we are separate rivers. She says, if your religious principles or spiritual principles lead you to live a life that is kind, that is compassionate, that is loving, that, as she puts it, honors the stranger, that is a skillful set of principles. If, on the other hand, your spiritual principles lead you to be unkind, to be belligerent, to be violent, those are unskillful principles, and they will not lead to your greater unfolding. That's a very simple test. So as we go through our lives, the challenge for us is to, at every moment, think, what principle is animating my behavior? One of the principles that I find very difficult for me is the notion of ahimsa, which is nonviolence. One of the keys to living a compassionate life that you will see in every faith tradition is living a nonviolent life. And one of the things we are invited to do is think about how violence shows up in our lives. Violence toward ourselves, certainly, the judgments, the assumptions, the self-denigration we exercise on ourselves, but also toward others. And not just, by violence, I don't mean going up and whacking them with a 2x4. That's violent. I suggest you don't do it. But also just the way we think about people, the judgments we extend to people, the snide little comments we make about people. There are so many ways where we can examine our lives. And this is tough to do because some of that stuff is so easy. And we fall into it. I fall into it. I'm one of the most sarcastic people I know. It's unkind. Yeah, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. It's not kind. And okay, put your hands down, just kidding. But it is something that I am attempting to overcome because I think it gets in the way. As I reach for this truth, as I reach for a way of living that will embody for me that we are all one, that brings us to that compassion and equanimity and peace that it is possible for us to get here, even if we don't have 20 years to sit at the feet of a guru. I don't have 20 years to do anything. I got to figure this out like soon. But we can do that. We can do it by the choices we make, by the awareness we bring to every experience we have, and by the gentleness with which we treat ourselves and each other. So what I want to do, that's enough from me. What I want to do is, really, is that a promise? Is open it up to discussion. When you think of Here's the Truth, or when you reflect on this series, if you've been here for it, or based on what I say today, what are your thoughts? That's my definition of the truth, is the understanding that we are one, that we are all of the one, and that the separations that we see, that we experience, sometimes that we celebrate, are just illusion and are not lasting. And that the pain we find in our lives is when we cling to that, when we continue to attach ourselves to those differences and those lines we draw that don't matter. So what are your thoughts? I saw some heads nodding when I said it's easier to be right than be compassionate. Can I still be right? Yes.
That spoke to me. And many years ago, I heard someone say, to make yourself right, you have to make someone else wrong. And that was the most...
I'm just doing this so folks can hear you because that's a very good point. Yeah.
Someone said a long time ago, to make yourself right, you have to make someone else wrong.
Yeah.
And remembering that, and that is unkind. And that helps me whenever you want to be right. I mean, I think it's totally cool when people say
Yes,
that
I want to be right.
I do. It makes me feel so superior, But what makes me realize is that if I'm right and I make someone else wrong, that makes them feel the opposite. Mm-hmm. So that's a filter. Whenever I remember and I get this righteous business, I think that sometimes, remembering that phrase, sometimes makes me stop.
Yeah.
Not always.
Yeah, but then we also think, but I have to tell them they're wrong because there are principles that matter here. So, not only are you right, you're like the avenging angel of this principle. It's really hard because putting compassion means putting our ego aside. And that is so hard, especially in our Western culture. But the fact that we don't gets in our way of seeing. It's not even the connection between us, because a connection kind of suggests we're all separate yet connected. Seeing that we are all voices of the same Spirit who is having the same conversation. Every out-breath is one of us. Every emanation is one of us. We are not separate. And that is, it's such a, I don't even know if that's a helpful thing to say. Is that an image that is helpful to you? It is to me, but it may not be helpful to anybody else. Judy.
When I first became involved in this philosophy about 25 years ago or so, I was so excited to find a spiritual community that didn't tell me what I had to believe, but would help me solidify my own belief system. At the same time, I had a close friend who had been raised Catholic, and she found a little evangelical church that she was so excited about because it finally was going to tell her what the word is and what she should believe. And I can remember thinking back how arrogant I must have been within myself, thinking, well, I'm on the right path, and she's so limited by this little thing that she's involved with. And then as I detoured a little more and came to understand that she was absolutely where she was supposed to be, that was her truth. And I think it's why I appreciate the inner faith, inner spiritual studies that we do, because I've come to understand that whatever that word is, wherever it's taught, if you believe it enough, it truly connects you to spirit, and as you say, to all that is, and to the oneness, then it's the right one.
Yeah.
May I, what you mentioned about, that if you can name it, it's not that called my attention, because I find that when I get really upset about something, I realize that it's never about what just happened or whatever. There's something more, because I know that in the moment, the emotions that I'm feeling is very ego-driven, right, with the judgments or it could be guilt, or whichever direction I'm pointing fingers at, is very much up there, and it takes me time to just break it down a bit and look at, okay, where's the fear and where's the love, and what's driving what,
Yeah.
and then that's what helps me go in the direction that I want to go in.
That is such a useful exercise, because what that raises for me, and I want your thoughts on this, is it's so easy to say, I have to get past my ego. I must ignore my ego and just kind of focus on my connection to the greater Om, you know? But the toolkit we are given is our ego. That's what we have to work with. And remember last week when we were talking about precision and gentleness and letting go, what are we looking at? We are looking at our own ego. We focus on it. We focus on ourselves. And by doing that, we can break down the walls that we have constructed and use that tool to understand that we are one with each other. So we don't take our ego and put it aside and say, this is useless. We do what you said, and we look at it. We say, what am I saying? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? That is the ground with which we work, is our own humanness, to understand what makes us one with everything else and everyone else. We would be nowhere without that. It's a gift. Linda, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I had experiences while I was working with a lack of integrity in the workplace, and also malfeasance. And one of the things that really drives me is integrity. And what I would do, and it happened to me several times toward the end of my career, because I was a contractor, they felt they could get me to do anything they wanted me to do. And specifically within the state of Georgia, on a contract for them, I picked up on some really unlawful practices with auditing and so forth. And instead of confronting anybody or doing anything about it or trying to be right, I just gave my notice and walked away. And I found that was the best way to handle a situation where you knew that you were going to be caught up in something that could be criminal and you had to walk.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't that I was trying to be right. I was just trying to get the heck out of there. So I thought I'd just bring that up because it was a big deal in my life, and I hated it, and I despised the way that it made me feel, and I just wanted to move on. So, thanks.
Yeah. Tor.
You know, it's interesting. Everything that everybody said kind of speaks to me in that truth is not a thing. Truth is a journey. Truth is how we live every day, and it's not like I gotta get there. I gotta get to that thing in that box or in, you know, on that wall, whatever. It's here. It's
Yeah.
all how we get up, how we show up every day, how we try to show up better every day. And that's what this community has made me so aware of and given me tools to try to show up as a better person every day. But you never get there. There's no there to get to. It's because, you know, as Maria said, it ain't that. You know, it's not that. It's all of that. It's all of that. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
Trying to get my thoughts together about this, because the integrity and the truth and putting it in, you know, I kind of have a motto: do what's right. But,
Yeah.
you know, what's right to me may be different than what's right to you. But then I put that in the word of integrity, and integrity is you do what's right when nobody's watching. So it gets very difficult, but that gets to our belief. There are many paths to the divine, and each reflects truth. If right is the truth, then just that, you alluded to it earlier, my path and journey is my truth, and yours is yours, and everybody in here different is yours. But on the day-to-day basis, as what I like to call myself being a human, it kind of really stinks, because it gets in the way of that truth and that right. I say right because, as a human, I want to be right, but I'm struggling right now with kind of some of the stuff Linda alluded to. And I'm, you know, facing stuff that I'm in the midst of challenging. And I got to figure out how to do it. Because, of course, I think I'm right. So there's my reflection for the day.
Yeah.
Probably are. Yeah.
See, when I think about that, I think about truth, different meanings of the word truth. Sometimes I think, okay, let me back up. I think they ask, is there an absolute truth? I think there is an absolute truth. And the absolute truth, as I see it, oh, there you go, is that we are all connected, that we are all of the one. That is a truth, expressed in different faith traditions, however they all do it. However, we do each have our own truth being a code of how to live. Sometimes I think that my truth, is a set of filters through which I experience and interpret the world based on my experience. That is a very subjective thing, and it raises issues of integrity. What is integrous for me may not be what is integrous for you. Those are my filters and my truth, but almost for me, that is truth with a small t, because that's a set of filters through which I experience my life, and I interpret my life and I act. But what this invites us to do in terms of awareness, like Maria said, is take a look at what those filters are. What are the prisms that we are looking through? What are the assumptions we're looking through as we interpret and experience our world? I think when we do that, that is an invitation to perhaps generate empathy with other people. Remember when we were talking about Desmond Tutu's book, Beyond Forgiveness, last year? And what he was talking about was when he did the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa, and what he realized as he sat in the front and he listened to all these people testify about these horrific things they had done and the victimization that they had inflicted or had experienced, he realized that he could have done any of that. That he, in the right circumstances, with a different skin color and a different economic circumstance, that could have been him. And that generated, this is Desmond Tutu we're talking about, that generated such empathy because he was able to kind of see past his filters and perhaps walk into theirs. So as we consider the notion of truth, I think it invites us to look at what we are experiencing and how we see it. Does that make sense to anybody?
Several months ago, I decided to subscribe to the Marietta Daily Journal. Start reading it every day. Just get a little behind every now and then. I catch up. And I know that in this community it's getting more diverse, but it's very conservative. So I know that a lot of the people that read that paper and are in that paper that I have very different political opinions and see the world very differently. But what I like about the paper is that it also focuses a lot on service organizations in this community. What are churches doing? What little achievements are some of the children of the community having? How is this community helping each other through just, different clubs and service organizations in the government, even the Republicans in the local government, how they're working to try to help the community from where they see fit. So even though I know that I disagree with some of those politicians and some of those people I can see where they're helping, they love their community, they're taking part in things. So I try to, when I have a disagreement, remember that there's this other side of them that is just as much them as their political opinion. And they're helping people, they're serving this community.
Yeah.
So just reading that paper has been helpful to me.
That can be the hardest thing to do in this world, which is so divided, as you said, yeah.
Hello? So I like what you said about so I was thinking about the small t, capital T, because you just mentioned small t, the filters. And so possibly there's the capital T truth, which is the one substance, the higher self, like the capital S self, the lower S. And so maybe there's the capital T truth that comes from our capital S self, and then there's the lower T truth that comes from our lower S self. And those are the filters, and they keep changing the more that we get closer or further away from the self. And possibly, if everything is a macrocosm, microcosm, etc., we are all the world inside of us, and then together we are all the world together. So inside of me, I have all these voices, right? There's a part of me that thinks this, or believes this, or wants this, and sometimes at war with each other, which is really fun. Those are good things. And then there are times when we all get along, we're all in harmony, we're all like, yeah, let's go in this direction, or whatever. Just like if we step outside ourselves, so if I'm the universe with voices inside me, then we step outside to the universe with all of our voices, which are all expressions of the truth or the self, pushing up against each other, trying to figure out what is the truth, what is the capital truth, but we got to work it through all these little T's against each other, right? So to your point, right, where there's different ways of seeing things, what is right, what is wrong? There is no wrong if it's all just expressions, right? So all the small t's are expressions of the big T. So really you can't be wrong in that way. Okay, that's it.
No, I think, no, you're right. And with the, what you said about the voices within yourself and the universe being within yourself, that's 100%, I wasn't going to say true, but I'll go with correct. Yeah, I'm there. I agree.
That doesn't get you off the hook. Accountability is still important.
No, it is. Yes. Hey, Jim, yes.
Well, thank you. A lot of the discussion here tonight reminds me of my childhood that was on a farm in the Midwest. And I think probably the most exciting thing that I remember, we had a herd of sheep. And they had, of course, babies, and lots of babies every year. And my dad used to get upset because there were so many of them. And I find that was my best entertainment in any given day, because I could walk down to the fence that fenced our backyard and yell, "Here, Lemmy!" And oh my gosh, they'd come from all directions, and without hesitation, and rush up to the fence because they knew that's where the voice came from. And I think that the fact that they trusted me to pet them and to feed them and do whatever had to be done. And those are kind of the bygone eras of animal care and farm care and so forth. And I think it's kind of too bad that it has kind of just twittered away.
But you know what that makes me think of? Thank you, Joan. What that makes me think of is another practice that we can use, and that we do use, and that I used this past week, when things were going completely to, I won't say it on video, but one of the ways that I found, just like you did, to experience that oneness and that sacred moment is just by saying, I'm not going to worry about what's going to happen. I'm not going to fret about what's gone before. And I literally, it was an effort, but I sat there and I just petted my dog. And I focused on that. It was so dumb. You know, I should be, worrying or fretting or fixing things or doing something else. But no, I said, I'm going to be right here. I'm not going to think about all that stuff. I'm just going to be with this animal right now. And it was such a I'm sure you've all done that, but it was such a transformation. It just transformed that moment into one of peace and connection and joy, where previously there had been no peace and no joy. So little things like that, thank you, Joan, things like that remind us that we can create those moments. Big things out of somewhat small things. Denise, did you have something?
Yes. New Year's Eve, I went to a friend's place and my SUV overheated. So it's like trying to, on New Year's Day, trying to find, a tow truck and get everything. And through 3 weeks that it took to get it all fixed, every time I started doubting or this, that, and the other, I just kept saying, no, I'm going to trust, I'm going to trust, going to trust, going to trust. And so it just, would leave me going ahead and believing that and just putting that forth. And everything just worked out like it should. And, a warranty covered a lot of the things. And in actuality, it was a blessing it did happen, because I had a motor mount that was very loose, and I also had we'll call it an arm joint. It's not the CV joint, but with the tire rod and all that, which was also discovered.
And they found that.
Yeah, so my engine could have dropped, my tire could have gone completely. So, this was a blessing, and not in disguise, but using that big T in this case, I think, is trust.
Yeah.
Trust.
Well, and surrender is an important point,
Surrender.
which is really hard.
So in listening to all of this, I guess I generally, in the sense, agree with that the big truth. But I guess where my human self struggles, I have a problem. It's not that things should be black and white, but I have a problem sometimes with, I don't want to say facility of the truth, where facts don't matter, like when your truth maybe poisons my water, or facts are truth. Like in essence, in other words, nothing will matter. Like if I say, this pen, this is a goat. It's not a goat, it's a pen. So, in that's where I struggle where the line is. I get the filters and the bigger version of the truth, but I also think that there is a concrete truth of just facts. And when we lose that, I think that's to our detriment.
That goes back to what you said, accountability matters. You were kidding, but I think you're saying the
No, I was
same
serious.
thing. Yeah, well, you were smiling, so. What do we think of that? Yeah?
So this whole discussion, especially with the little t and big T in the facts thing, has brought me to kind of like one thing that, so I'm going to talk about math for a second. It might be boring, I'm sorry. So there's this thing in math, in discrete mathematics, called totality, which is no matter what true or false statements you say, you'll get to true statement, no matter how you arrange them or anything.
That's in math?
Yes, that's in math.
Wow.
So you can say this is false, this is true,
Yeah.
this is false, and somehow, no matter which way you organize them, it'll get to a true statement. And so now with the totality, there's something called a not statement, which is the opposite of whatever true or false statement you have. And that's called a contradiction. So you can organize a totality and a contradiction, which a contradiction is always false, to have a true statement and a false statement. What does that give you? That's one of the greatest math problems of all time, really, and nobody's ever able to solve it, because it's something that's totally true 100% of the time and something that's totally false 100% of the time. What does that give you? So I think that leads us to this thing where there's only one truth, and that there is no truth. truth is this abstract thing you come up with in the clouds. It's just a word. Most things are just words. And to be able to have a truth, you also have to not be able to have a truth. So it's like this paradox where you keep going around in a circle.
Yeah.
And to not have truth, you have to have truth. And so what makes your truth true is what makes somebody's truth true, if that makes any sense.
It's experience.
Yeah, it's an experience that can only be led to by mirroring somebody else's experiences and reading about somebody else's experiences, talking about it. So
Living it.
Yeah, living it. So you build this totality and contradiction at the same time, only by coexisting with each other. There's no truth if you don't have, I don't think, some type of conflict. Because conflict, I believe, especially like the ancient Greeks, like philosophers don't believe that the only way to resolve conflict is with conflict. That's why they like to debate. But yeah, so it just had me thinking about that paradox.
What I think of when I listen to you is that was such, I mean, seriously, that was such a wonderful explanation of the inarticulability of truth. The Upanishadic sages used to have a practice, it was called Brahmoja. And what they would do is they would sit and debate about the principles in the Upanishad. And the end of every Brahmoja was they were just struck dumb. Every conversation led to silence because of those paradoxes, because of those things they could not explain, because of the ungraspable nature of truth. But, you know, this is a good wrapping up point because you're entirely correct. I think it's not the sort of thing that you can learn by reading a book or by memorizing everything your guru says. It's by living it and experiencing it and working on yourselves and going through and going through that process of unfolding yourself. It's not easy, but at the end it is so worth it because it leads you, even if you never grasp that paradox, it leads you to a place of greater knowing, and it leads you to a place where knowing that paradox exists is okay. Yeah, it's a journey. Yeah, Nicole.
So that's a cool point. So to follow up on that, what's making me think is, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that the Tao is both the everything and the nothing. Yes, okay. So it's kind of like that, the contradiction is the yes and the no, right?
Yeah.
The Tao is the everything and the nothing, which is, I guess you could call spirit or you could call energy or whatever. And what I often do sometimes is I've noticed that I'll like zoom the lens in too far, where like everything matters. Like this color matters, where this goes, what this person said, you know, everything that really matters. And so then everything has meaning. And then I'll zoom way out where it's like, well, we're all gonna die. If the universe explodes, who freaking cares? It doesn't really matter that the universe was created in the first place. Why the hell are we here? Like nobody's gonna care, like really at all. Nothing matters, right?
Yeah.
So then it's like everything matters and nothing matters. And so it's up to each of us to zoom our lens into the place where we feel fulfilled in that given moment, or we're learning something, and sometimes we have to push the lens in too much or too out, or whatever. But it is the everything and nothing. It's a sliding scale. It's the journey, it's the truth, it's the whatever. Who cares? Like, you know, like sometimes I'm just gonna die anyway, so just like make the most of today. You know, like sometimes that's really soothing.
That's
I don't know why I
not
landed on
bad.
that, but that's the landing point for me today.
Yeah. That's a good landing point. Yeah. Kathleen.
Kathleen, here's
The Constitution or the Bill of Rights was one of those things. Doesn't it say these are the truths we hold self-evident?
Yes.
That all men are created equal? And goes on. So that's the idea of, that's one truth that our nation believes.
Yeah, that's one of our articulated truths. Yeah, that's true. There you go. Okay, this has been a good discussion. Thank you. I'm gonna cut it off because we have a community potluck after our service, and we're gonna have a hug meeting, and we have more chance to chat. But thank you, folks. Do y'all like these discussions? Yeah, I like them. Yeah, I like them. They're challenging, and we learn a lot. All right.